Welcome back to the Unabated podcast. I'm Gina Fiore. On this week's episode, Tom and Jack sit down with Ed Feng of the Power Rank. Ed discusses his new audiobook and his process for power ratings. He also talks about the football prop bet that he's been researching this year to find an edge. Please enjoy this discussion with Ed Feng. Here's Tom and Jack.
That's the new word, unabated. That's the biggest word I know.
Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the Unabated podcast. I'm Thomas Viola, and joining me, as always, Mr. Unabated himself, Captain Jack Andrews. Jack, we're finally here. It is week one of the NFL season. College football is already underway. The CFB Future Simulator is out. The Survivor Optimizer and NFL Futures Simulators also up and running for the season. Football is here. Are you excited for another great season?
Absolutely. Look, I love summer. I love getting outside and, enjoying the Jersey Shore and all that. But I can't wait for this week because I know this week we finally get to bet on some football and there's going to be tons of props and people are going to be crying about the teaser prices out there and how Unabated wrecked that market and all the fun things that we do every fall. So, yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a while. I know our user base in the Discord they're just chomping at the bit, man. They cannot wait to be betting on the NFL. So really been looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm excited. Finally seeing more than zero edges on my screen here in Las Vegas. We've got actual things that we can bet on. The sports calendar is just going to get even better as we head into the fall here. It's going to be a fun one. And today on the show, we're talking to Ed Feng, who has a new audiobook out that's a 60-minute guide to the NFL season this year. It's well worth your time, well worth checking out before the season begins here. And we're going to get to talk to him about a whole bunch of stuff, including everything he does at the Power Rank, some of the teams he's looking at this season, some that he thinks may be a little bit overrated, and a lot more. I'm excited. It's going to be a great show.
Yeah, let's bring Ed in and see where we go with this.
Let's get to it. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome on into the show from the Power Rank. It's Ed Feng himself. Ed, thank you so much for being with us here again. It's great to have you back on.
Tom, Captain Jack, thank you guys so much for having me on this week.
Now, you actually just released an audiobook to get people ready for the season here, the 60-minute guide to the 2024 NFL season. For those that are trying to cram and have one last hour that they want to commit, tell us a little bit about your book before we get started here. What can people find in it? What do you share that you won't be sharing necessarily in the next 30 minutes here with us?
Right. I mean, I wanted to share a few deep dive stories. My original plan was 3. Then the 2 stories I was working on ended up both taking a half hour. Maybe that was a ode to Captain Jack, because I remember how we talked the last time we talked that you have exactly 30 minutes that you like to listen to podcasts. So I thought 30 minutes was a pretty good time. This has to do with some of my research that I've done. The first is how to predict interceptions. And this is something that I've used for props on my site the last year with a lot of success. And I think the story is pretty interesting, both in terms of predicting things that we thought were kind of unpredictable before, things that I said were unpredictable before, and then also in terms of how to do the data science and how that came about. I don't have any original ideas, guys. I'm just someone that takes ideas from other people, like Bill Connolly in this case, and then I figure out a way to bet with them. And the same with the second story. I read one day that Nate Silver was using the preseason AP poll in his NCAA tournament predictions, and I thought that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And then I started running some numbers myself, and I was like, "Oh, this is actually pretty effective." And I took the idea of like a preseason AP poll. It's a wisdom of crowds approach, and it really seems kind of dumb. I'm actually working on the NFL wisdom of crowds model right now. It will be released tomorrow on my site. And it's pretty interesting to see a lot of teams have Green Bay number 2. And you're like, God, these sports writers, they're so dumb. And in general, I wouldn't disagree with you, but when you put a lot of sports writers together, you get this wisdom of crowds effect. And I talk about how that's useful in predicting NFL spreads, how I think this is a handicapping tool that you can use the first 6 weeks of the season, less so later, but maybe a handicapping tool that comes back in the postseason. And those are the 2 stories that you can get in the 60-minute guide. I think there are a ton of really quality paid kind of print guides for football that are like in depth and cover every single team. I think there are plenty of kind of audio, like conversation, unedited kind of podcast previews out there that you can get for free. I didn't really see, I saw an opportunity maybe to have a paid audio product, something with a little bit of higher production quality, something that's pretty well thought out. I don't cover every team in the NFL. I don't cover 134 FBS teams, but I do give you two stories. I think you can apply some of the ideas immediately. And I hope people find it entertaining as well.
You know, Ed, what I liked about this was it wasn't something that I could get regurgitated to me every other way in either a print guide or in some YouTube video or even a podcast. It was a well-researched audio narrative of an approach to sports betting. And the one that resonated more to me was the second story, the one we just touched on there about the wisdom of the crowd's approach to building a point spread model. And it reminded me of something that people have used for a few years. I think credit has to go to Poker Joe in his book Sharper, where he talked about using Madden ratings in the first part of the year. And using this wisdom of the crowds approach in the first part of the year appears to work better, not perfect, but works better than any other approach when it comes to power ratings for the first half of the year. What I like about it, though, is you keep the listener engaged the entire time. You have a very good delivery. This isn't meant to be a critique or a praise of your work, but it's a very good delivery that keeps the listener engaged the entire time. How did you kind of come up with this approach? And do you think you'll do more of this in the future?
Yeah, I mean, how did I come up with it? First of all, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That it means a lot to me because I do think there's a lot of audiobooks that kind of lack for that, and I try to be better. I think I have a ways to improve, but I really appreciate the comments. I guess part of it is I just try to listen back to like earlier drafts of what I was doing and get better, I guess. Try to put some more energy. I always record these things first thing in the morning when I think my energy's at its highest. I had another experience where I actually just talked through the script with some friends in my house to get some feedback. And so they gave me a lot of feedback on the content, and that really helped, I think, the content and the flow of how it went. But one of them was also like, you can't read this. Like when I give a talk, like I just speak off the cuff. And I kind of thought about it and I was like, okay, well, no. I mean, if I want to have something that's worth a sports bettor paying for, I think it needs to be thought out well enough that you need a script. But how can I make it better? Like, how can I make it better so that it doesn't sound like I'm reading from a script? And in some sense, Jack, I kind of fake it. I don't know. I try to think like
Sure.
I try to read, but pretend I'm talking to you maybe or to Tom. It's something I'm still working on. I've been viewing a lot of I like stand-up comedy in general, and I've also noticed recently that they're basically up there yelling, and it doesn't seem to us like they're yelling. It just seems like a stand-up comic, but they're essentially up there yelling. So I don't know.
So you
I
pretended
think it's okay in my process to think like, yeah, I can be a little bit loud with this, and it'll probably come off like energetic to the
It
audience.
does. It does
Yeah.
come off energetic. In fact, Ed, having spoken to you in person many times, this was a different Ed Feng that I was used to talking to. So, in fact, when you began the audiobook, I wasn't sure that was actually you reading it.
Interesting.
So, kudos on that. But I think it's very well done. I hope you do more of these in the future because this is a different type of content than what's out there from other people.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm going to try to do more of this style on my podcast. The Football Analytics Show is mostly interviews, but it is my intent this fall to, have stories like this where, I like to open with a description of a football play. I think that kind of engages the sports mind and kind of gets you away from math and betting for a sec. And then get into the point I want to make in terms of betting and analytics, and and then just go from there. I hope to do some shorter ones on my podcast. So, and then, people continue to like those. I would be honored to do another one next year.
And people really don't understand that. That's something that's so big in the broadcast world when you talk about like bringing the energy and being able to go over the top with it. People don't realize, and it makes you feel a little self-conscious when you first get in front of a mic, but no one's seeing your face. It's like listening to this podcast. You do go 110% and it comes out at like 60%. And that's something that
Right.
like it's definitely a talent, and it's a skill that requires time to figure out and to get used to. So again, really do commend you. But to talk about the actual content here, one of the things that you of course talked about with us last year was the batted ball statistics being a good indicator of interception rates. I don't know if you remember that angle from last year. I'm sure you
Yeah.
do, but we talked about that on the show here. Is that something that you're touching on in the book there? And is that still something you consider a viable angle?
Yes, absolutely. The idea with the interceptions is, interceptions are pretty rare events. So 2.3% of pass attempts in the NFL end up as interceptions. And that's rare, and there's just a lot of noise. And the idea is that, well, let's look at other events, like a bigger set of events. And luckily, in the play-by-play, they keep track of all plays in which a defender gets a hand on the ball. They could tip it at the line of scrimmage. It could be a secondary player that gets a hand on the ball. It can also be a case in which a defender jars the ball loose with a hit. So those are passes defended is kind of the technical term in the play-by-play. And then I essentially look at interceptions plus passes defended. I call those bad balls, and that's what I use to predict interceptions moving forward. And what I'm excited about is I think the idea is very general. I've actually been working on sacks, and sacks are another thing in which the event's pretty rare. It happens about actually almost 7% of NFL pass attempts ended as sacks last year. But another thing, and actually what's interesting is so you look at a quarterback sack rate, and it's pretty sticky, right? It's pretty predictive moving forward. It's about as predictive as completion percentage. It's about as predictive as the bad ball rate that I've been telling you about how to use to predict interceptions. The other thing that's so let's use the same idea for interceptions. Like let's use sacks, but like the play-by-play also tracks every time a quarterback gets hit by a defender, right? So let's look at the sum of sacks plus hits, and I'm using contact rate. That's like the contact rate for a quarterback is like the most predictive thing I've ever seen for a quarterback. It's like twice as like the R score is like twice as much as what the sack rate is. So yeah, I use it to predict interceptions. I think the idea is generalizable. I'm working on sacks right now. Don't have many results, but I think yeah, I mean, I hope that's part of the value of getting the 60-minute guide to the 2024 football season. Things like that, where you expand the set. Maybe that's applicable to other things in sports, maybe to other things in other areas as well.
So back earlier, you were talking about how in that wisdom of crowds method, people were overrating the Green Bay Packers. Has anything else jumped out at you so far in looking through different rating systems to find what teams might be systematically being overrated or underrated?
Right. I mean, I'll have to email you the exact answer to that question tomorrow, Jack. I'm
Okay.
kind of halfway through right now, but I don't know. I was surprised that multiple sports writers had Green Bay second and at least one third from the couple that I have tracked. There were, a couple of them had them closer to NFL average. So yeah, I mean, that's something that's like a work in progress. We'll see. I mean, I think Green Bay's good. I think they have a pretty high ceiling, but I think they're borderline top 10 team at this point. Their defense was pretty bad. We've seen 9 good weeks of Jordan Love, but the first half of the season wasn't great. So I don't know. I think it's an exciting division. Everyone here in Ann Arbor is pretty excited about the Detroit Lions. They're also getting a lot of love. There's a bunch of seconds and thirds there as I start tracking this stuff. So we'll see where it all ends up.
Now, also, one of the things you do is you have your power rank, and we have our unabated season simulator. We renamed it the Future Simulator this year, by the way. But it's really cool to take your ratings and run them through the simulator and kind of see how that translates out to wins and odds to win the division, odds to win the conference, odds to win the Super Bowl. Have you had a chance to do that? And if so, have any futures bets jumped off the paper for you that you've looked to make yourself?
Absolutely. I did a lot of work with the simulator last year. Had a lot of bets. A lot of them worked out really well. I have not had a chance to do it this year. The problem with the wisdom of crowds model is it ends up coming together this last week before the NFL season starts. I wait for these sports writers to have kind of all the information, and then we're recording this the Tuesday before the NFL kicks off on Thursday. And this morning, it's if you search NFL power rankings, they just come up every single minute, right? And the big outlets like the Yahoos, the ESPNs, and so I'm slowly accumulating them now. They'll be on my site as soon as possible, most likely Wednesday. You can get the results of these on the free part of my site. I've always done it on the free part of my site because I had no idea how predictive it was. And now I feel like I can't take it away from the free part of my site, even though, it is a part of it also is a part of the paid model that I have as well. I'm waiting for that to come along before I start messing with the simulator. I'm definitely planning on using the simulator a lot. And man, I am pumped that you guys have the college football version of that coming this year. Is it the college football future simulator?
It is, yes.
So
So, I
I'm
mean, we've definitely talked about it in the past, and it's out now and available to use. It's the latest stroke of genius from Rufus, from the brain of Rufus, and it's really powerful. And I think the duality of the power is not only that it simulates the rest of the season, but it also has a model built into it that simulates the selection committee. Because that's the real wild card when you come to a playoff of 12 teams, is which teams will the playoff committee anoint as a top 12 team. And there is an algorithm that they have posted, but it's also a little bit about, strength of schedule and strength of division and conference and common opponents. And so it is really exciting. Thanks for bringing that up, Ed. One of the things, though, and you're alluding to it, is these are not necessarily things that have to be done preseason. These are
right.
viable futures bets mid-season when it comes to the NFL and college football. And the big one this year in college football is, will they, won't they? Will they make the playoffs or won't they make the playoffs? I think that's going to be a huge bet at every sports book as the season goes on this year. And I'm looking forward to using the future simulator in that role.
Absolutely. And also with college football, like my numbers tend to move quickly on teams. I've tested models that don't move quickly and tested models they don't move quickly because they tend to use season-long averages of things. And then models that tend to move quickly based on the last couple of weeks of results tend to predict college football better. And I think we get past week 2, past week 3. I'm really interested to see what my adjustments say about their playoff odds, right? A team like Oregon that did not look good week 1, even though they still won against the NFCS team. Yeah. So how are that going to? I was going to say Florida State, but they might be out of the playoff picture right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how does that work? I think it's an incredible tool. When I was thinking about what I wanted to do this year, I was like, I would love to have playoff probabilities. Now you guys have done it for me. It's fantastic. I can spend more time doing some sack props and in the NFL, and then we can share answers, and that'd be great.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you send me the sack props, I'll send you the playoff probabilities, and we'll make money on both sides here.
There we
Sounds
go.
good.
The exchange of information on the podcast here, just not for the listeners in this particular case. Now, would you, when it comes to certain things, like you talk about going into going deeper into the regular season, both NFL and college maybe even a little more so, how much are you weighting your priors from the preseason? Because I know this is something that Rufus talked about for college basketball last year, is pretty heavily. But how is that going along for you, especially with teams that you see like Oregon here, like Florida State, and then even going into some of these NFL teams, like again, the Packers, who we saw as one team the first half of the season and a completely different team the second half. What are you looking at, and how much are you weighting your priors as we get deeper into the season?
Yeah, exactly how much is I mean, it's somewhat proprietary, but I actually don't know because it's in my code, right?
Mhm.
There's a model for how it decreases. It is different in college football and the NFL. Uh, in college football, I tend to move off priors very quickly. I think maybe too quickly after week one. I think I had a 5 point drop for Florida State after the Georgia Tech game, which I was leery of, but they didn't look good Monday night, so that one seems okay. So that moves quickly, and it's look if you look at week 10 versus the preseason, there's certainly going to be correlation there, right? But
Mhm.
if you do have teams that are clearly getting better or maybe have quit on a team, um, that model is going to show that. In the NFL, I tend to lean more on season long averages and the preseason priors in there a lot. And I would say like, I mean, when my number is off from the market, it's probably leaning towards what we thought of that team preseason. And I think both of the models are good. I do use them to bet spreads, but I just don't think that's the most efficient thing. I think that's why, like, when you talk about the simulator, like, those different behaviors between college football and the NFL, I'm really interested to see how that manifests itself in the futures market.
When it comes to those spread markets, though, do you find that the market tends to overcorrect much more or undercorrect? Like, is it more that we see, we saw this team last week and everybody's just reacting to last week?
Yeah, I would say the market. I mean, it's certainly not every game, but a lot of games. Like my reaction in my model is pretty consistent with what the market is doing. I'm trying to think of an example for week two, but I can't come up with them because I only really looked at the ones where they were really different. But it does seem like the correction is about the same. I do it based on data, but I also do it based on the closing spread of the prior week as well. So that has a big influence there. And a good example there was Florida State, right? Like I actually had Florida State minus 10.5. I probably would have bet them minus 13.5. The market really moved against them, and that was part of the move against Florida State. Not only were they terrible, but the market moved against them as well. Could that be that Georgia Tech is good? Sure, that's still a possibility. But the model reacts, and it moves on a team like Florida State.
Now, how about in the NFL? Like we're obviously sitting here on the precipice of week one. We have no idea what's going to happen, but are there some teams, the Packers are one that sports writers are high on? Are there any teams that Ed Feng is a little bit higher on this year going into it based on what your models are telling you?
A little bit higher. I mean,
Higher
Tom,
or
I'm,
lower
I'm a
than
little
the
bit more of an overrated guy.
hmm
I'll give you two. I'll give you two teams that I am not sure about.
Hey, that's perfect.
Yeah, so the New York Jets is a team that I think are potentially overrated. You can obviously tell why because their quarterback's 40 years old, and there's been exactly one human who has excelled at the quarterback position past that age. And there's a lot of other humans like Drew Brees and Peyton Manning that haven't done so well. I think there's a lot of questions there. The defense obviously has a ton of talent. It's been a great unit over the last couple of years, but they've had a lot of good health in the secondary for 2 straight years. So
I've
we'll
been worried
see.
about that.
We'll see if that continues. The market's moved against me. I mean, the over 9.5 wins is continuing to. I mean, the market tends to go there. But I like the price that I would get on the under there as well. And then the other team I think is potentially overrated, and it's tough when a team lands at NFL average to call them overrated. But the Chicago Bears I have at dead NFL average right now, and I think that's a tall order. I mean, you have a rookie quarterback, and we all expect him to be good because he was the first pick in the NFL draft. But how good are the past first picks in the NFL draft? You look at the Trevor Lawrences of the world, good quarterback, but not the best in the NFL. the Kyler Murrays, the Baker Mayfields of the world, right? There's all this talk about how they have all these weapons, and I do really like the receivers that he has. Can they get to NFL average from a unit that was really bad? Sure, I think they potentially can, but I think that's more of their ceiling than the kind of their median outcome. I like a lot of their pieces on the defensive side of the ball as well. I like Jalen Johnson in the secondary, the cornerback. I think they do have some talent on that side, but can they continue to play that well? Defense tends to be kind of unpredictable. I feel like having them near NFL average is a ceiling type result for them. I'm interested to see what my Wisdom of Crowds model says tomorrow. Right now, from what I've pulled from some of the subjective power rankings, it seems like it agrees with them being about NFL average. So we'll see where that analysis ends up.
I feel like
The
the problem.
watching Tom's countenance fall when he says, "Oh yeah, give me an overrated team," and then you come out with the Jets. Man, that was just too
John, bud.
perfect.
I feel like the problem with modeling them this year is, yeah, on paper, it's like you said, on paper they look like a fantastic team, but then you have to really account for the injury risk going on. I actually have been thinking about the same thing about how they haven't had an injury in that secondary in a little while, and it
And
gets
they've
a
been
little thin. It gets a
and they've
little
been
thin up there if you take it. Like if Sauce Gardner or DJ Reed, knock on wood, goes down, it starts getting a little bit tougher in that secondary, and people are just assuming the defense is going to be exactly what it has been the last several years. But it's not like defenses aren't more prone to regression in the NFL, right?
No, they are.
Yeah, it's
Um, so I mean, like we know that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense should be good. And as I say that, they had probably one of their worst years overall last season, but offense tends to be pretty sticky, defense not so much. And I think that's something that like I try to use in my handicapping for like season win totals. Like, teams that were really good, I mean, they were probably pretty good because of talent, but like just like take the Browns last year, who were like incredible on defense. It's it it's almost impossible to expect them to be that good again.
yeah.
Will they be a top 5 unit? Yeah, I think that's a pretty likely outcome, especially if they stay healthy. But yeah, and the same for the bottom teams. Like Green Bay's defense was awful last year. Only one way to go, and they should be closer to NFL average at least. And plus they've had players that have supported a defense that has been above NFL average.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I'm really excited for, look at the week one spreads. So many of these games are expected to be close. And it feels like one of those years where the Chiefs have gotten a little bit better and the 49ers still look amazing, but it feels like one of those years we're going into where there isn't really a clear cut. It's going to be these teams in the Super Bowl again. I'd be very surprised if we see Chiefs 49ers as a rematch here. I think it's going to be a fun season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really fun season. I am hoping for some quarterback health because I do think that always leads to better games and better outcomes. But it's always fickle. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great season as always.
Definitely. All right, Ed, thank you so much for joining us here today. Real quick, one more time, where can people find you and all of your fantastic work before we head out of here?
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for having me. My name is Ed Feng. You can find me at thepowerrank.com. That's where all my stuff is. And the 60-minute guide to the 2024 football season is the audiobook. I have a little page set up on my site. You can get there by going to thepowerrank.us. That URL will take you to a place on my site. You should be able to, if you have a certain plan on Spotify, you can potentially listen for no additional cost. I encourage you to check that out at the URL. Otherwise, it's available for purchase on many platforms.
And we'll plug the link for that in the description of this episode as well, so you can check it out down there. But for now, that is going to do it for us. Best of luck on the NFL season to everybody. I know we're all excited to get it going. Summer is over, even though it's 105 degrees here in Vegas, and football is back. Ed, one more time, thank you so much for being here with us today. I am sure we will be seeing plenty more of you as we get through the season here. But for now, that's going to do it for us. Best of luck, everyone. And as always, let's cash some tickets. We'll see you next week.